Hi, everybody. My name is Mack Martin. I'm the RPG designer here at Weird, and this is our very first Through the Breach recording. I'm hoping it goes as well as our tests have done, so we'll see what happens there. I'm going to start off by answering some questions from the forums and from the Through the Breach Kickstarter comment section. In the future, if you guys have a question you want answered on these breach side chats, just go ahead and throw them into the Kickstarter comment section with @ThroughTheBreach, and I'll make sure I take a note and try to answer them on the next breach side cast here. And I don't know, it's going to be really straightforward, really simple. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun. You'll get your questions answered. Our goal here is to adjust them every week so they're always in a different time. And well, I'm going to say a lot, aren't I? So we're gonna switch them up to the time so everyone gets a chance to listen, and we're gonna go through a lot of the information. I'll be going into character generation, all kinds of fun stuff later on, and some tonight, and then hopefully later on I'll be able to convince Eric to actually just sit down with us and make a character so that you guys can see the process from start to finish. So that'll probably be the next one, and yeah, we're gonna have a good time. Hopefully everybody can hear and see me. If you can't, let me know. But I guess if you can't hear me, how would you know that I asked you to tell me if you can't hear me? Well, we're just going to get going then, and hopefully it all records properly. I'm going to start by addressing something that I get asked a couple times on Facebook, and has been kind of a bit of discussion that's been going on our Kickstarter and on the forums and so forth. A lot of people have asked about the $30,000 mark, especially on the Kickstarter, to see, what was that amount, that sort of thing. That amount is really kind of the minimum we could do to where we would know that there was the interest out from you guys, the fans, as well as the starting capital to really get it going. At this point, we are well underway. We're at $150,000+, so we're over 5 times funded, which is pretty incredible, and I want to thank you guys a lot for that. That warms the cockles of my heart, if you will, the subcockle region, to quote Dennis Leary. And that amount of money means that, one, we know there's a ton of interest out there, and we can start doing things like committing to additional supplements and making the book bigger and better. That 30,000 was a low mark. That would, we'd have probably been doing a smaller books. It would have been maybe even black and white. Who knows? But at the current total we're at, you're going to see some fantastic books. Honestly, to do this right and to do this the way we want, we're hoping to hit about 200, 210. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that this thing happened, and you're going to see more writers to get this done even faster. A great example is that September 2013 deadline was that's the last day we want this thing to be in your hands. It might, cross our fingers, no promises here, but we're hoping to do a lot sooner, going a lot further, a lot faster, getting this thing really just done and awesome, and put the play testing behind it that it deserves, and do a lot of really cool things that are coming out. The 150 mark has already allowed us to add something really cool to the game that I think is going to excite you guys all. And I'll talk about it a little bit more a little later on, because I see a question that's a really good time for me to answer that and really reveal something new a little bit later in our discussion. But when we get there, I'll bring it up. But yeah, that's the idea. Is a lot of people have wondered about that 30,000 mark and why it was so low, and what it means that we've breached it. And what it does mean is we're going to make this game phenomenally well. We're going to be pushing forward. Faster writers, more writers. We've got the team we've got now who are fantastic. The internal, as I like to call them, the internal teams, the guys who have been working on weird stuff for years, like Dan Weber and they're all going to be offended because I just brain farted. It's the end of the day. Hopefully they understand that it's that Dan and David and all the group knows that I'm just exhausted, and I apologize. It's also a really good time for me to do this because as exhausted as I am from a hard day of work, I might let some things slip that I shouldn't, so we'll see. So I'm going to start here. Dauntless Games asks, what would make me pick up Through the Breach instead of grabbing something like D&D and just writing it into a Malifaux setting? I'm just curious to what Mac, that's me, thinks as the defining characters of Through the Breach that set it apart from the competition. Well, Through the Breach just has some unique mechanics that really fit the theme of the game. D&D is a good game, and its mechanics fit that theme. While you could certainly overlay the Malifaux theme on any mechanic system, it really wouldn't be the same. Malifaux has a lot to do with cards. If you've played the Malifaux skirmish game at all, you'll know that cards are an innate part of the skirmish game, and that is certainly true of the role-playing game, where the card mechanic alone should be a big deal. I know D&D doesn't use cards. Sorry, I may have misspoke there while trying to form a bunch of stuff. The flow of text is actually quite distracting. D&D uses dice, but our game will be using cards, and that's D&D is designed to make its system work. And technically, D&D does use cards, sir. You can buy your power cards. So neener neener boo boo. But yeah, our game will have a unique system that's designed just to make Malifaux feel like Malifaux and run like Malifaux. So hopefully that would be why you choose our game. Also, you're going to get a lot of setting information and background information that probably hasn't been released yet that we're going to expound on. And that's going to make the books themselves a fantastic buy for anyone who's just a fan. Good night, Eric.
Good night.
He's leaving now, so I'm no longer allowed to make fun of him, apparently. So yeah, that's my terrible answer to that question. Ours is unique and will be a lot of fun. That's why you buy ours. Next, how will supernatural ability? This comes from IV or 4. I'm going to call you Roman 4. This comes from Roman 4. How will supernatural abilities be balanced against mundane talents in Through the Breach? Most named characters in Malifaux tabletop game use supernatural moves, even ones who do not fit into the traditional role of casters in RPG. Other characters have special moves, some are melee, etc., etc. He goes on for a second here. How will the game effects of non-supernatural talents differ from the way the game handles soulstone magic? One of the things about the Malifaux universe is that everything is somewhat infused with magic. Can you... Oh, Matt's going nuts on the red marker. And, I'll just take it down for you if that's. Does that help? Does that help some? Okay, sorry. I should stop reading the flow of text while I answer these questions. So Roman 4. Basically, everything is infused with magic in some way. That's why the red and black jokers can pop up. Magic flows through every action a person does. So while harnessing magic to actually cast spells is one use of that, there are many, many other characters who will have semi-supernatural abilities. The gunfighter who's just a ridiculously good shot. The sword fighter who can move through a crowd killing 5 or 6 people, or the guy who can just take a bullet to the chest and not die. So there's a lot there that will balance the non-spellcasters with the other characters who are just supernaturally powerful or just kind of cool and doing their thing. But yeah, I will be paying special attention to make sure that every character feels unique and powerful. I do not want any character to feel like they're just sitting there while everyone else slings spells or does incredible stuff. Guys, if you're asking questions in the social stream, please hold them. I'm not really going to be able to read that stream right now, but I will be getting to it later, and so I'll be asking, all right, somebody post a question, I'll answer it. Okay, everybody post another question, I'll answer one, so because it's going to flow out of my view pretty quickly here. So let's keep that going. But I will try and be a little extra clear. All right, this comes from Bjorn Benton. Hey Mac, love your description on Gamers Lounge. Wondering though, will the suit of a fate card play any role in certain checks or abilities, something like the Malifaux's triggers? Absolutely. Suits will be a big deal, and you will have triggers on your character. It's that simple. The mechanics of the Malifaux skirmish game are going to dovetail a lot into the mechanics of the miniatures game, of the role-playing game. While they certainly won't be exactly the same, you'll see a lot of similarities, and you're really, really going to get used to. You're not going to be seeing anything that uses the cards in a phenomenally alien way. There'll be new ways to use them. There'll be new tricks, new things that characters do, new ways that characters advance, et cetera, et cetera. But for the most part, you'll see triggers, you'll see reflips, you'll see plus and minus modifiers, so you'll be flipping more or fewer cards, that sort of thing. So don't be surprised if you see a lot of mechanics that kind of happen the same way. eBadger asks, Xbooks would be awesome at 30. Oh, I answered that one about the 30K. This will get us thicker books, better books, more art, more writers, that sort of thing. So I've kind of covered that one. Peter Holland wants to know about how these rules will be hashed with the standard Malifaux tabletop rules. They will be very similar, but they won't just be a rehash. Obviously, if we wanted to just toss out a character creation rule set and a way to resolve bang I shot you, no you didn't, or can I climb this wall or not, we could have done that, but instead we would rather this be a full-fledged role-playing game on its own. One of the questions a lot of people ask is, will it use miniatures, will it not use miniatures? The answer is that the default setting, the default version of the game is Theater of the Mind. You will not be required to ever use miniatures to play this game. If you want to play from your entire campaign with never breaking out the miniatures, you're perfectly able to do that. That being said, we have, I'm going to do a little bit of an announcement here, let you guys know about something a little early for those of you here, and then we'll talk about it more in tomorrow's update. We have a system that we're testing right now, thanks to the additional manpower that we can put on the project because of the Kickstarter and because of how well it's funding. We are going to be building into the, right now it's slated for the Fate Masters book. Now, of course, none of this is binding. Anything that tests badly will go out and get replaced. We want to make the best game possible, but there's a system we're calling Dispositions right now. That name is tentative, where you basically choose a disposition for the day or the fight, and that will turn your character into a Malifaux tabletop skirmish character. So you'll take your RPG character, pick a disposition, and then that will act as a formula to become a miniatures character. This has a couple of really cool effects that really excites me. First of all, you'll be able to just run a complete campaign using nothing but miniatures if you really, really wanted to, and using that really crunchy Malifaux miniatures combat system. However, if you wanted to just, say, run a really cool campaign for your Malifaux miniatures game, you could each create a character to use as your master and then escalate them slowly but surely. I do not have a booger in my nose, guys. That's fantastic of you to ask that, but it's not there. That's good times. I'm gonna have to get mad at you later for playing that trick on me. So yeah, that's the new hotness. We're gonna make sure that players who do both can, or who want to do either, can do either, and that the mechanics of the role-playing game do have a way to segue into the miniatures game for campaign play and for fun stuff like that. And then, yeah, that's really about it. We're pretty stoked about that, and that's something that can only happen because we have the additional resources from the Kickstarter. Man, this social stream is really, really distracting. I gotta quit looking at that. Jonathan Boynton says that he is wondering something about character creation. How much will players be able to customize their characters? Will there be a system in place so that two players of different pursuits using the same weapons will still end up playing differently? I'm thinking of the talent system from Star Wars. He likes Star Wars, which allowed an incredible amount of diversity, versus some things he doesn't like in other games. All right, the basic system is pretty fluid. Random character creation is not as random as people may think it is. The basic idea is that every character will end up at the end of the day with the same number of points on the sheet. A great example would be to look at D&D or Pathfinder, and rather than randomly rolling every stat, you'd randomize and you'd get, okay, this is my array. I know that I'm going to have an 18, but I'm also going to have an 8 or a 7. So I have to kind of, how does that factor in? How does that function? And so there's a lot of moments of choice as we go through character creation. And a little bit later, probably next week or the week after, as soon as I can pin Eric down, we'll do a full character creation. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But the basic idea is, no, you'll have a ton of options, even during character creation, to make sure that no two characters come out exactly the same. And you'll have plenty of options as the characters advance to make sure that everyone is that everyone is going to have something completely different. The example I use is we actually have in character creation we had two guys who wanted to play a gunfighter, a gunslinger kind of character, and they rolled up almost the exact same. Like many of their attributes came with the same, but they interpreted them very, very differently. They had different origins. Their characters had different stations, is what the first card flipped is called. It's your station. So they both had different stations, which influenced the entirety of their character, and then they each had completely different fates. The list of 5 omen fates that make a character completely different than anyone else. So at the end of the day, we had one who was extremely excited about playing a tough as nails, going to get in there and pistol whip a guy, kind of up close gunfighter who relied on his brawn and his muscle, while the other guy was playing a much more lean kind of. He chose guns because he didn't want to get shot or he didn't want to get punched, and he's not slow to draw. He's he quickly draws his gun and he's willing to throw down at a moment's notice. So we had 2 very different characters. I'm muddling it, I know, because I'm trying to remember the 9 characters that have been made, but no, they both were playing gunfighters, and they're totally different. So yes, there will be lots and lots and lots of options for customizing your character. If any 2 characters come out the same, I will be extremely disappointed. Falk Calamors, man, I hope I said that right, asks 3 questions, and I'm just going to go through them real quick. At which point after the opening of the breach does the RPG take place? Will it be possible to play one of the teams who went through first in 1887? It will be the game will be set at the same time as the miniatures game. However, if you wanted to run a really cool campaign like that, you should have all the tools in the book. You'll have enough explanation, and I would, for one, get behind a campaign like that. I think that'd be really, really fun. I certainly think it would be possible, but the core setting is set in the same time period as the miniatures game. 2, are you going to develop online tools for character generation? We've certainly talked about that, but there's a bit of a tea ceremony effect, is what we're calling it. When you sit down to create a character, it has a lot of gravitas. It has a lot of, it's a moment. It's when this character gets made. It's when this character does some really, really, really cool things. And we don't want a random generator to kind of take away from that. It should be you and your Fate Master sitting down, telling the tarot, talking about what that means, building the character as a person, not just a collection of stats. However, that doesn't mean we won't produce stuff to help track a character or keep a character looking cool. We currently have no serious plans to make that happen. Like we've chatted about it, but we haven't really gotten started on anything. So I don't know if it'll actually happen, but we certainly have discussed it. Someone in chat has mentioned Nerf guns. Our office, those are required. That is my defense system against Justin and the other guys. Third question from Falk. Will there be additional information about the world outside of Malifaux, especially the old world? Yes. Maybe not as much as you're expecting or hoping for, but there will certainly be more. We need to flesh out the Earthside a little bit so that players understand what's going on, so that Fate Masters really know what's happening with the game world. So yes, we will be fleshing out Earthside some, but the focus will be mostly on Malifaux and where the game is happening, because that's the most prescient information. But you will get some Earthside history, and we will be pulling the curtain back a little bit on some of the mysteries over there. And 4, will we learn more about the use of magic outside of Malifaux, especially in regard of official control and restrictions? Yep, that's going to be important to players playing the game. They're going to need to know, mostly sorcery and that sort of thing is illegal and just, kind of locked down by the guild. But there's certainly other magical things like building constructs, etc., that have some tenuous legal ground and or are perfectly legal. So we'll be talking a lot more about that. Guys, I see more questions coming through on the chat. Just hold them till the end. I'll certainly be happy to answer them all at the end. I keep seeing Fate Hamster fly by, and that is my new name for Fate Master now. I love that. All right, I Spy asks 3 things. Will player characters have triggers for all actions? I've answered that, I think. Yes, players will have triggers. But he also wants to know, will NPCs have triggers? Yes. The way an NPC trigger works, since players don't flip, or since the Fate Master doesn't flip, whenever players flip a negative effect, that has a possibility to trigger the effects that are on the NPC. Whenever they're flipping with a positive effect, that's theirs. And second, there's been some grumbling. You know, guys, when it comes to Fate, when it comes to the stretch rewards and that sort of thing, I'm not that guy, so I couldn't really answer them in any real capacity. I apologize. I know you want answers, and I would like to give them to you, but if I gave you anything, it would just be speculation on my part. So from here on out, I'm going to see what I can do about just focusing on the game itself and those game questions. I just don't have answers for you about Kickstarter stuff. It's not me. Do gremlins poop? That is a callback to my time with Dice Like Thunder when I asked. I did an interview with a fellow named Ross Watson, who's writing for this book. He was the designer for Rogue Trader and Death Watch. He's a really good writer, really good friend of mine. I'm lucky to call him a friend. But we gave him a hard time when I first met him by asking him, do cherubs poop? So my answer is no, goblins don't poop. That's why they have to drink so much. The only way they have to excrete is to vomit. And now we have Constant Prager. Constant Prager asks, 1, are all characters able to use soul stones, or is it an ability you gain during the duration of the campaign? No, not every character does start with the ability to use soul stones. There will be some ability to use soul stones there, but for the most part, there is a ability called Harness Soulstone. That's its name currently. And that ability, as you get better at harnessing soul stones, opens up new things that you can do with the soul stones. But we go into a lot of detail in the role-playing game about soul stones. There's more than one type. There's a lot more design space put into the flavors of soulstone, if you will, in the role-playing game. So that's gonna be a lot of fun, and maybe we'll get to talk about that in depth later when those details are fleshed out. Second, do the Fated share one Fate deck, or will they each of them use their own? The Fated, all the players use one Fate deck. That's a central Fate deck that they all share. However, each player also has a 13-card twist deck. Now, this twist deck is very straightforward. A lot of people have asked if they have to buy a new deck. No. We're not making you buy a new product. That'd be a huge jerk move on our part, and is totally unnecessary. Each character will design their own twist deck during character creation. They'll make a few choices and decide which cards are what. And they're going to have a 13-card twist deck, and that's going to act as the little pool of cards they draw their control hand from. That way every player can kind of tailor that to themselves, but it stays small and manageable. That way we don't have a ton of decks floating around the table, and at the beginning of each game session you can just make sure you've pulled the 13 cards you're going to use out of a standard Fate deck, and that's what you have in front of you to draw your control hand from and to cycle through and that sort of thing. And actually that twist deck improves as your character gets better. So as they learn more skills or level up or buy certain talents, they get to add and alter cards that are in that Fate deck, or that twist deck. So that's one of the ways in which a character grows and becomes more powerful, is to improve their twist deck. It starts off with a card 1 through 13, and then there's a lot of different ways to alter what's in there. Will I be able to summon undead hookers, and will I be able to ride pigs? Also from Konstantin Prager. For summoning undead hookers, I don't see why not. That's certainly a spell we've established in the game, so creating undead and creating undead from the Ladies of the Night should totally be possible. As for riding pigs, well, the starting book, the first book, the Through the Reach Player's Guide, only has player character options for humans, so you're going to need a pretty big pig. But if you're asking if you can play a gremlin, we certainly are aware that people want to play gremlins, and it's not something we're going to not do. And we'll have more details on that later. It's kind of one of those big reveals we want to save for a couple weeks down the line. But the answer to that is, come on, we know you want to play them. We're not jerks now, are we? Well, okay, I'm a jerk, but you know what I'm saying. We're not stupid. Let's see. Will Earthside religions be covered in the RPG background info? Asks Dan Sulin. So, will Earthside religions be covered in the RPG background? Probably not. There's a couple reasons for this. One, none of us feel qualified to describe the way in which major religions would change or be altered, or the variety of things that would happen when magic enters the story, but also it's just a matter of respect. There are many religions out there, many major religions out there, that really don't appreciate it when forms of entertainment, forms of media alter their basic tenets or speculate on them. And frankly, there's so many religions that I've never had an experience with that I would feel disingenuous kind of doing that. So any mentioning of religion will be fairly light, most likely, and will be very general. I would rather save that space for fleshing out history or characters or making stuff that's really genuinely interesting for every player. Frankly, there's just so many faiths that I don't feel comfortable making decisions on, and many of them would be very offended. And this is a game. We're all here to have fun. While we do kind of run an edgy line from time to time, that's one of those things where we might talk about it a little, but I doubt I'll go into deep bits about it. I won't go into this long diatribe on how the Catholic Church changes because of the introduction of soul stones. It's just not necessary for the game to be fun. And why offend someone if you don't need to? Then again, I do have zombie hookers, so I feel that it's important to offend people at some point, right? Pride365 asks, well, that isn't an answer I'll be able to give. Can you tell that I have not read many of these yet? My goal is to give them very off the cuff so you guys get genuine answers and not answers that I'm kind of prepping in advance. So it's asking if there'd be a way to listen to it on Ustream. I'm going to look into some ways to make that happen. I can't promise anything, and obviously if they can't listen to Ustream, then they can't hear my answer, so that doesn't really work very well, does it? That looks like the end of the Breachside Chats questions that I've been flowing through here. So now I think it's time. That's good. We made it about a half hour in. So let's start opening up to you guys here in the social stream. This is where the show will get even more disjointed, and I'll start to stutter and look more confused than ever before. Hopefully, as the Kickstarter goes on, I'll get better at this. So I apologize, guys, for my what should I call it? My unprofessionalism. I'm not used to video casting, and we're really just trying to do this off the cuff. We would really, really like it if you guys were able to just communicate with me, and this is one of the ways we've thought we might be able to do it, and there will be other ways, so please don't hold my sucking at this terribly against us. All right, so let's just start asking. Zamao 626 asks, will characters have suited stats? No. Players will not be like members of specific factions in the miniatures game. They will not have specific suited stats. They'll have triggers that work off suits, and a character that starts as a gunfighter and then or a mercenary and later becomes a death marshal and really starts working for the guild will certainly have a lot of triggers that go off rams. He'll have a lot of abilities that add rams-based triggers to his character. So you'll see that character kind of become that slowly but surely. Guys, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to answer one question, whatever's at the top of my screen when I ask it, or when I get to it, and then we're just going to keep going. So you may have to re-answer some of these questions, or re-ask some of these questions. Ginny Underwood 90 asks, will there be 10 Thunders in the RPG? Absolutely. They are not just going to be villains. There is stuff in the core book for you to be able to play characters aligned with the 10 Thunders. All right, next one at the top. How possible will it be to create a character or become a character like Leviticus or Hoffman in the rules? Creating that character would be rather difficult, since I'm planning at this point to give you their stats. But making a character like them using pneumatic/steamcraft stuff for Hoffman or similar constructs for Leviticus, absolutely. Steampunk is a big part of our game, and there is a large portion of the rules dedicated to making really cool steam stuff and making pneumatic arms and replacing limbs and making full constructs and the whole nine. That is certainly going to be something in the game, and there'll be a lot of that in the initial book, and then we're hoping to expand on that greatly in future supplements. Dark Jackal X, is that the guy called Tom? Well, Dark Jackal X, can you share about your gaming experience, games that have expired you, games you are actively playing? Currently, my active games played obviously are Malifaux. I play a lot of Malifaux with my girlfriend when I get to see her. She's away in Minnesota. Hi, Chrissy. Uh, but I do play a lot of Malifaux. I as well play D&D 4th Edition. I'm in a game that I'm enjoying quite a bit. And I'm also playing in a Pathfinder game, which I'm quite enjoying. I'm playing in the D&D game, I'm playing a wizard, and in the Pathfinder game, I'm playing a barbarian, and we're having a great time. I also run a now much less frequent Shadowrun game, but yeah, I've played a lot. I've played a lot of games, and I enjoy a lot of games. I'm real easy to please when it comes to gaming. I'm there to have a good time. Todd Spengo asks, "Is there a divergence between the RPG story and the game story, miniatures game story?" No, they're same world. That storyline will affect both games equally. That's simple. I really wish I could make it more complicated, but the storyline is set, and the two games will just kind of follow that same storyline. Let's see. When you play the game, does it feel as though you could take over the world? Well, I can always take over the world. I'm me. But no, it's your characters start off with a reasonable power level. They don't start off as dredges or as guys who are at the very, very bottom. But they don't start off extremely powerful. I like to think that they start off about guild guard level, right? About convict gunslinger level. They're a little bit weaker than, say, a death marshal or an Austringer. So they start off able to handle themselves. They can take on some gremlins. They can take on crooks. They can do all kinds of stuff, but they aren't terribly overpowered and able to reshape a continents yet. That comes with time. Are you going to be using miniatures released for the RPG beyond the two customizable and the Kickstarter? I don't have an answer to that. One, I don't know the future, but two, it's just kind of outside my realm. The RPG, as I've stated a little earlier, doesn't use miniatures as the default, but we have announced the cool disposition thing, or I talked about it a little bit earlier, about the disposition system where you can convert your character into a miniatures game character. So that certainly will be part of the game. Will the Masters and Malifaux have stats in the RPG? Currently, yes, that's the plan, to stat them all out and have them be characters that you can simply interact with. I leave it up to the Fate Masters in their personal game to decide whether or not your group is capable of killing Lady Justice or Leviticus or any of those characters. That's the Fate Master's job. That's the story he wants to tell, and I'm totally fine with that. So I will just be giving you the stats, and you'll be able to see how that translates into the miniatures game using the dispositions. What about having a Fate screen? Certainly been talked about. It'll be a really good tool for the Fate Master. We don't have anything solid yet to announce, but we have certainly discussed it. I would like to know if the current pieces of the miniatures line will be statted out for use in the RPG. Thomas Gray asked that. For the most part, yes. I don't know if there are any that it's not going to work for, but for the most part, if it's something in the RPG, you will be able to see its stats for the miniatures game. As a matter of fact, because of the disposition system and because of the closeness of the RPG to the miniatures game in mechanics, if you know offhand who the stats for your gremlin, like if you play gremlins and your players are fighting gremlins, absolutely, you probably already know what numbers they need to throw. For the most part, if you took a gremlin, because the Fate Master isn't flipping, you can imagine flip a card, add their stats, and instead of flipping a card, the Fate Master flipped a 7. It's always a 7. So like a gremlin, I forget offhand what his ability to shoot with is, but let's say it's a 4, he would always have an 11, and the player would roll to dodge that 11. Okay, let's see. Can you recharge soul stones in the game? Asked Mr. Cactus. That's a little undecided. The plan right now is yes, and there's actually a couple of ways to do it. But I haven't really gotten to that chapter and fleshing it out. Currently, the plan is yes, but that may change during testing. Recharging soul stones and making them work will be a big deal. How will automatic successes of the Fate Master's actions affect running the game? Will we need to be careful? It's not really... That's the word I'm looking for. it's not really automatic success. It's the assumption that the Fate Master determined that this was going to happen, and you're able to change that fate, and it'll be and its difficulty is based on the various whims of the Fate Master. For instance, if you let's use that gremlin shooting. Rather than the gremlin flipping a card and then the player flipping a card, the Fate Master goes, "This gremlin shoots you," and you go, "I'm dodging," and you flip a card and check your stats, and in this case you'd be checking your speed and your dodge skill, or sorry, evade, your speed and your evade plus your flip. So let's say your speed is 2, which is a pretty quick character, and your evade is 3, which is a character who's pretty good at evading. He has a 5, and he flips a 6, and he gets an 11. Well, the Fate Master determined that the difficulty to dodge that shot was an 11, and because you equaled it or exceeded it, you managed to dodge. And that's really about it. So it's not really that the Fate Master just says these things are happening and players have to really stop him. It's a very traditional role-playing game, but the core mechanic is that the Fate Master isn't actually rolling dice or flipping cards. He's allowing the players to simply react to the things he says so that he never stops telling the story. I watched, I want to say, somewhere between 8 and a dozen games just being played in my career. Just kind of watched these people play role-playing games. And one of the things I've noticed when role-playing games are being played, that the Fate Master has a tendency to stop doing the storytelling the minute the math happens. And so I wanted to keep that down to a minimum so that the games would be as fun and engaging as possible, so that the Fate Master would have a really easy time telling a cool story and the players would have a really fun time interacting with mechanics. So are there guidelines for assigning difficulty, or is it up to the Fate Master's mercy and mood? There are guidelines. There are absolutely guidelines. For the most part, they're set in stone. Like, this is how hard it is to jump this far. This is how hard it is to, break this kind of lock. So the Fate Master would say, "Oh, okay, it's a pretty good lock. It's pretty expensive. It's got 5 or 6 tumblers in there. It's something that nobody should be able to break quickly. Your character is really good locksmith and has a really good grace. So his lock picking and his grace get added together, and that the target number is 13, which is really high, really kind of difficult, maybe even higher, like a 15, and you flip a card and you have to get that very high number. But no, it's not just going to be the Game Master or the Fate Master being completely capricious. Dr. Fumbles asks, "Hey Mac, are you solely working on the RPG, or are you doing any work on the skirmish game as well?" I am certainly working with some of the guys on the skirmish game, but that's falling to Dan mostly. I am helping where I can, and we are certainly coordinating to make sure that the miniatures game and the skirmish game have a lot in common and feel like they're from the same family of games, but I'm not in charge of that one, or I'm not doing the design work on that one. Casserog asks, "Soulstones, will each player have a stack in their pocket, or will the whole crew find 1 or 2 in a story?" Soulstones are actual items in our game. In the miniatures game, they work as a form of currency, but in the the role-playing game, they are just something that exists in the game. Zamao asks, "How will weapon damage work?" That's one of the ones where I've got actually 3 options, and the current one that I'm leading towards is just like the Malifaux skirmish game, where players have wounds and weapons do damage. However, unlike the skirmish game, characters will probably have less wounds, maybe 3 or 4. And when they hit 0, bad things start to happen to them. They don't immediately die or are taken out of the fight. So it's going to need some balance tweaking. That's something that will come later when I do balance testing and making sure the combats run smoothly and are awesome. But until such a time, no, that's basically like the miniatures game. Weapons will have weak, moderate, and strong damage, and they'll also be doing a variety of other effects, and they'll have triggers and all kinds of cool stuff. So don't expect that to be so wildly different that you can't make the leap from one game to the other. Although the damage may be lower for the numbers, or I may leave it the same. I'm going to do my best to make the 2 games translate as much as possible between each other, but we're still early enough in the design space that's not necessary yet. John Sebastian Matt asks, Will there be any translation in the future, or is Weird keeping away from that? We're not keeping away from it, to my knowledge, but that's just something outside my realm. I'm not the guy who handles that sort of thing or makes those decisions. So sorry, Sebastian, I don't really have a solid answer for you on that one. I'm just not the guy to ask. Zamal, yes, they will work. Well, they won't work just like Dark Heresy criticals, but there will be critical effects that happen. There'll be some cool, fun stuff. There's a lot that happens with that. So yes, you might lose a finger or a hand or go blind or die in the critical effects. So that'll all happen based on the cards. Lord Shaper asks, is there any way that a player will lose control of their character like Tuco becoming Neverborn? That's the purpose of fate. Sometimes you will become unmade. The fates. Some people have asked me about the fates. Fates are extremely cryptic, and they're there for the Fate Master to really interpret through the story, not just to decide what they mean when they happen, to really weave them into the story and make your character's destiny and all the player character destinies a real part of the story and really kind of make it awesome. Yes, you can certainly become undone. That would be one of the stories that could be told about your character, but who knows? And yeah, you'll get to see more about that when I convince Eric to make a character for us all. Ramon asks, will the Fate Master book have a big section of enemies? Yes. We're not doing a 3-book, like some games are 3 books. We're doing 2, which is the Player's book and the Fate Master's book. Right now called the Fated Almanac and the Fate Master's Almanac. That may change between now and release. And it's intended that the Fate Master's book will have a wide selection of creatures, more than you would need. It's a good chunk of the book. Hopefully enough for you to run a campaign extremely quickly and easily. Can we become Neverborn and still be PCs? Like my Gremlins answer, we know that's something you guys want to have happen, and it's certainly something that we're not against. But the initial book is about playing characters who start as humans and are humans on the other side of the breach, over on Malifaux side. So any of that other stuff will come with future announcements, and we'll talk about all that later on. Sorry, that's just one of the ones we're being cagey about. Dark Jackal X, I'll say Tom. I'm pretty sure that's Tom. Tom asks, what are your chief design goals, and how will Through the Breach differentiate itself from other RPGs? The goal with Through the Breach is to make something that's uniquely Malifaux and to be one of those games that people look back on with fondness 10, 15, 20 years from now. I've played a lot of games that don't really function the way I want them to function and don't feel like the mechanics belong for what they're trying to do. So we want Malifaux to feel like you're playing Malifaux, to feel like you have control of your destiny, and to really be themed around the idea that your character has a fate that he is either moving towards or fighting fiercely. So it's one of the two. We want that theme to really be what's rich in this game. And hopefully as we go forward, you'll see some of the new ways in which theme becomes extremely important to making the game fun and awesome and cool. Gray asks, are there a significant amount of fates? Yes. In the initial book, there's 54, which combine 5 cards out of the 54 cards will combine to make your fate. So theoretically speaking, there are so many fates in such a wide variety of orders, which can all be interpreted by the Fate Master in completely different ways, having you will die or you will be the uninvited as your fate may mean something completely different for you than it does for the player who's sitting right next to you. Or maybe your fates are intertwined. You don't know. That's up to the Fate Master. So it's limited only by the Fate Master's imagination. And we start off with a good 54 in the core book just to really make sure that things are as crazy as possible. Zamal and Coconut Monkey ask, how are stats generated if diceless? They're generated with a card flip. Basically, there are 8 stats total, 8 aspects as they're called. Each of these 8 aspects are divided into 2 halves, 4 mental and 4 physical. Whenever you you'll flip a card during your character creation, once for mental and once for physical. When that happens, you'll get an array of 4 stats. So these stats will always end up adding up to +1. So maybe 0 being average for a person, negatives being below average, positives being above average. So if you flip I don't have the chart in front of me, but if you flip a card and you get a -3, a +0, a +2, and a +2, your character is very bad at something, and then he's well above average in 2 other things. So it's hard to demonstrate without Eric here to make a character. But when we make characters, you'll see the higher the card in your aspects, the less focused your character is. The more well-rounded his upbringing was, the more well-rounded he is in general. It should be the goal of any character to be average. Being average in Malifaux is not bad. It certainly means that you have bonuses. And then later on in the process, after you've generated both your physical and your mental stats, you will then get a couple points to spend to up those stats. So if you don't like the fact that your character has a -3 in his charm, because you have an idea that the character isn't really that uncharming, you might put your points there to bump those up to a -1, which is just a guy who is maybe a little impersonable or doesn't really talk a lot or doesn't like talking in front of people much. Or you might use those points to bump a +1 to a +3 because you had in your mind this character who really was fast on the draw and was really graceful and really powerful. If the game uses miniatures, will you guys make or sell printed adventure model kits with maps? I've already discussed that. The game will have the option for miniatures, but its default setting is not miniatures. So flipping ace means you're super min-max. Yes, an ace will min-max your character, Troy. You do not want that. You absolutely do not want that in this game. The more well-rounded your character's stats are, the better off you are. Because there's things that will attack any of your stats, and having a clear weakness is probably a problem. You know, having a low tenacity when Lilith comes calling may be a problem, maybe a big problem. So the higher that stat, the less focused they are, and and then the opposite is true when you start generating your skills. The higher you flip, the higher one of your skills are, the more focused your training is. You'll see more when we generate a character with Eric. Are pursuits going to be like archetypes from Black Crusade, or more like careers from Dark Heresy, or something else? Pursuits are designed to be what your character is really focusing on at the moment. There'll be pursuits and advanced pursuits. The basic pursuits are the things that players can start as, and they'll be pretty straightforward. Gunfighter, mercenary, academic, dabbler, if you want to start dabbling in magic, that sort of thing. Those characters will, later on as they grow, have a selection of advanced pursuits that have prerequisites that you have to earn to be in, but most of those are story prerequisites. For instance, there's nothing about your stats or attributes that says you need a 3 grace to become a death marshal. Instead, it says the gist of it is you need to be working for the guild in some capacity and have earned the trust and loyalty of the death marshals, and they're willing to train you. So that's how you would become a death marshal. Being brought into the Resurrectionists obviously requires that you make contact with them as a group and that they like you and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of story mechanics that go into changing your pursuit. But the basic pursuits are just there for players to just generally flip between. If you're playing a gunfighter who is part-time gunfighter, part-time gambler, when you're out on the road, your pursuit might be gunfighter or mercenary when you're riding shotgun. But the minute you get to town, you might switch over to Wastrel for the next game session, which you know is going to happen mostly in town, and be a Wastrel for the time being, just getting drunk in the tavern. Your abilities don't go away, but what you're trying to do, the activities you're pursuing at that time do change. So it's designed to shift quite a bit as between you and the Fate Master. It's a way to tell the story mechanically. All right, Mr. Cactus asks, how detailed will the descriptions of the city be? Will it be fleshed out more in a supplement? I'll have to go into that more in detail later, but we plan to really get into the nitty-gritty of the city so that players can really tell a story in that city. You're going to need to learn a lot about the quarantine zone and a bunch of other stuff. So we'll be going into those in more detail than the miniatures game did. John Sebastian Matt asks, will there be any avatar form or tyrant in the game? I kind of want to just evil grin at that. Avatars are would be extremely high-level players, and that's something we'll talk about at length later, but that is not the assumption in the default game. Zamal asks, experience points. Yes and no. I decided to go, and this is just one of those pet peeves of mine. I understand that role-playing games represent the mechanics of the world mechanically, or the reality of the world mechanically. I, on the other hand, have always wanted to see a game that feels to me a little more natural and fluid. So the way the game is basically going to work is there are three ways you improve your character. Way number one, skills improve on their own over time as they're used or as you fail, depending on a variety of circumstances. The mechanics of that I won't go into, but basically you can expect to see your character's skills improve a little every game session. If he's constantly shooting at stuff, he's obviously going to get better at shooting. That's just how these things work. Talents and special things like new triggers and that sort of thing come from your pursuit. So the longer you're on a pursuit, the more of those you'll get, and it's just kind of up between you and the game master. I expect the game master will, or the fate master, will be giving out an experience point system. I haven't locked this down yet, but those are points you purchase in special talents and abilities that come from the pursuit. And then there's a third way, which is your twist deck, and we'll get into that, or I've gotten into that a little bit already. Will there be... Oh, no, there's another way, sorry, to improve your character. Whenever you complete one of the steps on your destiny, you'll improve one of your attributes. Will there be a pet-assisted characters like the Hunter or Druid from D&D or the Summoner from Pathfinder? Yes, obviously, but that won't be the default. The assumption isn't that this class, this pursuit, uses a pet. No. Will there be pets? Yes. Obviously, you can build zombies, you can build your own steampunk thing that's going to follow you around, and that just is based on the options you have that your character has. That's all organic. It's not about going, I want a pet mecha arachnid. I have to play the mecha arachnid controller. No. You would play a dabbler. You would play a tinkerer. You would play someone who has access to that form of magic that you like. And then as you get bigger and better, your character would improve his contraption. He would over time, spend points in it, buy new talents, learn new spells. Improve in his abilities so he can make them better and better. Mannequins would be a good example. Yes, Prophet. And there might be an Arcanist kind of character, a dabbler who becomes an Arcanist who has a mannequin that he goes with him, or several. You can summon a zombie if you're not a Reser. None of these are Reser specific. The Resers are the ones who do it the most, obviously. But no, it's heck, you can play a completely non-magical character who in some way gets one of these companions. You might have a Peacekeeper that's just kind of... Peacebringer, Peacekeeper? I always get the two mixed up. You may have a Peacekeeper that's just been like, yeah, go with this guy, and he'll follow your orders, and he's a companion of sorts. So there will be pets, but they won't be built into a class. Without the Fate Master flipping a card, will you lose some of the epic feel when the GM would normally roll a 20? Hopefully not. In my part-time playtest, no, we haven't lost that. As a matter of fact, that's become even bigger and better because the Fate Master is always describing how epic the scene is, and then the player flips the card. So rather than going, the Fate Master holding the die and going, okay, if this comes up, blah, 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 or, he's going to attack you, oh, he rolled a 20, that epicness isn't gone. It's like this gremlin is shooting you, and you flip the card, and you get the black joke, and you're like, oh, crap. I can't believe my character just got shot in the gut by a gremlin, or the bad guy is attacking you, some major character that your characters have been chasing forever, some big bad, and he flips the red joker. Well, that's good for the players. Or you flip the red joker while defending against him. That's good for the players. It has the same effect as the GM rolling a 1 in another game session. Or system. So, no, hopefully we don't lose that epicness, and I haven't seen that happen in our playtests. So the Fate Master deck on Kickstarter, what is it? That's just our name for the RPG Fate deck. I don't think it should have been called Fate Master deck. It's a Fate deck, but it has some of the things on it that will help you play the role-playing game. For instance, it'll have all the fates, the lines of fate that are associated with the card, written on the card, so you have some additional interpretation options, and you don't have to reference the chart like you would if you were using a normal fate deck. All right, guys, it is now 6 o'clock, but I'm not going to quit on you. I'm going to answer 2 more questions, and then we'll get to the rest next week, I promise. Ramon asks, so will you sell adventure books? For not so creative Fate Masters, printed PDFs. He prefers printed. While we haven't announced anything, we are certainly looking at some really cool stuff. Nathan came up with a brilliant idea, and we're probably going to run with that. And we'll announce that later. But yes, if you're wanting to run a adventure campaign totally on pre-printed stuff or something that we or writers create for you, that'll certainly be an option. Yes, Dark Jackal, I am in Sacramento. I won't count that as my 2 questions, though. All right, guys, one last question. Let's see what comes up next. Type your questions. Who's going to get it? Who's going to get it? Come on, you guys can copy-paste. Oh, is there a delay? There's a delay. All right, Troy, will you really answer 2 more questions? Okay, no, that's not a wasted question. You guys are no fun. No more questions? Come on, guys. This is your last chance for the week. Make it happen. Make it happen. Can we do a little dance? All right, I'm just going to scroll down then. Fine, be that way. Meanie heads. Oh, someone, there we go. Here we go. Can I come play with you in Sacramento? All right, so now we're finishing up. It looks like I've got everybody's questions that's in the social stream. Todd, I answered that question a little earlier. It can, but it does not have to. There's a more detailed answer earlier in, and that's going to go up on the Ustream pretty soon when I save this. No, John, there's no clowns in the RPG. Will there be a bestiary? Yes, I answered that. That will be in the GM's book. What pursuit would you play if you were to play Through the Breach? There we go. There's our last question. We had a flood of them. Here we go. I have in my head a drudge, actually, or maybe an overseer. I haven't really decided which one he is. There's 2 pursuits that I really fell in love with. Drudge, which is and Mr. Cactus, Ian likes Malifaux better. The drudge, which is the menial worker, quote unquote, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Laborers are really, really important to Malifaux. Think of them as miners or caretakers of a location. There's a bunch of different things that a drudge can be. And I had this idea of a, not rogue, but a emancipated, if you will, drudge from the mines. And so he no longer works in the mines, but he's still got that pneumatic arm, and he's, his body is literally built for mining, and he's trying to make it in the world not as a miner, because he doesn't want to do that, and he's, he lost his limb, and they replaced it, and he was managed through some twist of fate to afford to emancipate himself from his indentured servitude. So that's one of the characters I want to play, so that's a drudge. The other one is an overseer. I've always wanted to play a game in which my character is the shopkeep of a town, and just has to kind of make the town function. Maybe one day becomes mayor or something. So a real political character. I fell in love with a TV show called Deadwood. So my overseer is based very strongly on Swearingen from Deadwood. All right. Guys, I'm going to stop recording now. Hopefully this will be up on the Ustream pretty quickly, and then tomorrow when we get back into the office, I'll talk to the guys about getting it up on other things. This has been a lot of fun. I hope it's been very enlightening for you. And so check it out again next week. We're going to have a blast, and we're going to do this every week. We'll announce another time for next week. Don't worry, European fellows. We understand how time zones work, and we're going to really mix it up so everyone gets a chance. Thank you guys all for attending, and I'll talk to you soon.